Sony has these three great WH-1000 headphones to choose from, but as someone who's worn them all long term, I can tell you that they are not made equal. I've been wearing the WH-1000XM4s for almost 5 years, the XM5 for 3 years, and the XM6 for so far about a month to find the best option for you and your budget. Okay, let's start things off by keeping it 100% real with you and showing you what they look like with long-term use. Here's the XM4s after all of those years. A little bit of wear here. They definitely don't look new, but not too bad overall. The XM5s also look okay, but there's some, well, I don't really know what this is on the XM5s, but droplet marks or something. The ear cups, though, on both are in decent shape, even though they are not replaceable like on some other headphones. And the XM6s, these are the newest of the bunch, and obviously they still look pretty new, at least I should hope they do, after only having used them for a month. And it's when you put them side by side that you see the real design evolution here. The XM4s look a little bit dated and boxy now, but they are still so light and comfortable to wear all day. The XM5s are my least favorite design of the three, not just because they lost the foldable cups, but also because the ergonomics aren't as good as the 4s or the 6s for my head shape. Over time, the hinge and the sliders on the 5s have loosened a little bit, so they often fall off when I'm moving around with them on. For overall comfort though, the XM6s win for me. The headband is more padded than the other two, and they definitely feel the most premium or luxurious of the three. The price also gives that away too. I also love that there's now a circular power button on the XM6s. The similarly shaped buttons on the 5s really drove me crazy, especially when I was working out which one's power and which one was ANC. And they all have touch controls on the right cup, swipe up and down for volume, go left and right for track switching. Compared to the other two, I do find that when I'm wearing them lying down or to work out, I do brush against these controls more than the older headphones, which results in either a changed track or a pause when I don't intend to. But I do like how there are fewer voice commands on the XM6s, so it's not all in your ear about all of the things all of the time. That is something that does drive me a little bit crazy about the other two.
Power on.
And here are the different cases. I do like the newer case the most overall because of this magnetic clasp, but I admit I don't actually use the cases that much even when traveling because they do take up a lot of room in my bag, and most of the time I end up just using a soft pouch, which is why I gravitate to the design of both the 4s and the 6s thanks to the hinge. Now the XM5s don't have that folding cup design, as you probably know, which makes them a little less convenient for travel. Now the most important part of a headphone to me is the sound quality, and between using the XM4s and 5s for the past few years, I still actually gravitate towards the warmer sound from the XM4s on default settings without tweaking with the equalizer. Now Sony did change the drivers between these models, so I always found that the 5s were a little bit more distant and I felt less close to the music than on the older headphones. Now I do have a dedicated headphone playlist with a bunch of different genres I use to compare headphones with, linked in the description if you want to check it out. When listening to the same tracks on all three headphones, I definitely lean towards the XM6s for a number of reasons. It's not a huge surprise that the newer headphones do sound better, but to me it's more of a nice middle ground between the warmth of the 4s and the more even-keeled, I guess, kind of studio monitoring feel that I get from the 5s. The bass response on the XM6 is also nice and tight. It's well pronounced and it's not overbearing or in your face, or in your ears, I guess, like the XM4s can be on some tracks. Now the XM6 has a Find My Equalizer test, which is such a great way to customize the sound based on your preferences, rather than having to manually adjust the EQ or choose a more generic preset. This is also available on the XM5s, but even with the same presets selected, I still prefer the newer headphones. All three headphones support AAC by default, plus LDAC on Android, and have Sony's DSEE to enhance sound from lower quality sources. I always keep this one on when I'm listening to anything from Spotify. If I had to rank them in order of sound quality, for me I'd say XM6s at number 1, XM4s at number 2, and XM5s at number 3. Now don't get me wrong, the XM5s still sound great, they just don't sound as good to my taste as the other two, which is not what I expected. Noise cancellation is also another area where the newer model really shines. Again, not a huge surprise here. There's 12 microphones in the XM6s, which makes all the difference for commuting and travel, but it's also so effective Then I found it blocks out the sound of me typing away on a keyboard and even other loud voices around me. Ambient sound mode on the newer headphones is also slightly better to my ears, but I can still hear a tiny little bit of the hiss. To try and give you an idea of how the ambient sound and the noise cancellation differs between the three, I've got a microphone, I'm going to put it in the ear cup, and I'm at nature's ideal ANC testing ground, the beach, to compare all three. Noise cancelling. And while we're here, let's talk about mic quality. The XM6s have 6 beam-forming microphones and can separate speech from the background noise. So let's do a little test to see if there's noticeable improvements over the older models.
Recording the audio from the microphones on the XM4s. Pretty windy outside. This audio is being recorded straight into the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Take a listen. Microphones from the XM5, still pretty windy and not very pleasant out here. And finally, audio from the XM6, still super windy. Let's take a listen and see how different they sound.
It's also worth noting that it is the only pair that have a mute microphone control, but you will have to enable that from the settings. The 4s and 5s do not have that same control. Oddly enough, battery life didn't really improve as the headphones got newer. The XM4's original claim is 30 hours of noise cancelling on, and that's kind of exactly the same as the 5s and 6s. Now, I can't tell you how many charge cycles I've done exactly on the older two headphones, but battery capacity hasn't depleted noticeably at all. I don't feel like I have to charge them any more than I used to when they were new out of the box. You can use all three in passive mode, which means even if you don't have battery left, you can still plug them in with the 3.5mm and they will work. Now, of course, you don't get the best sound quality or any of the noise cancellation features if you have no power, but it is still great to have this option, unlike some other headphones. All right, so the newer headphones, as you can probably guess, have a few more tricks up their sleeve than the old XM4s, but do any of them actually make a difference? Some do. The XM6s support Auracast. That lets you tune into a compatible Bluetooth source without pairing with that device. It's kind of tricky to find and it's Android only for now. If you go into the Sound Connect app, go to your settings and look for LE audio. Then go to the Bluetooth settings on your device and select the headphones and look for the Auracast broadcast option. The XM5s and 6s have scene-based listening. So that means it will adapt the sound based on your environment. So at home in a quiet space, compared to being out at the gym, will have different properties. The XM4s have adaptive sound control that can adjust the level of ANC and ambient sound depending on the environment. You can also use head gestures on the newer headphones to answer or decline calls, and you can listen to the XM6s while charging, unlike the other two. Now, both the 5 and the 6s have Spotify tap, so you can double tap the ANC button to automatically resume and start playing your music, and all three support Bluetooth multipoint, so you can have two devices connected simultaneously. Now, there is a lot more to talk about with spatial audio specifically, but again, keeping it super honest with you, I don't really use it that much on any of these headphones as the setup and the music app compatibility is a bit laborious. So as a long-term user of all these headphones, I want to give you the best advice based on longevity, price, and of course, sound and features. With that in mind, if you can afford the higher starting price, my overall favorite is the latest and greatest XM6s. They're more comfortable for me overall, and they sound fantastic. Next, you probably guessed I'm going to say the runner-up is the XM4s. Yep, they're 5 years old, but in reality, you probably don't need all the bells and whistles of the newer models. They still sound superb, and the noise cancelling might not be as strong as the other two, but it is still excellent for most situations. And my least favourite, the pair that I reach for the least out of the three, is the XM5s because of the design and the sound profile. Don't get me wrong, these are fantastic noise cancelling headphones, but when I compare them to the other two, they just don't appeal to me as much. As always, would love to know what you think, and if this was helpful for you, please do give the video a like. I so appreciate it, and it does help me make more videos. I will see you next time.